I've got all of my pieces out on the screen except the collar. These are my originals. This is the sleeve that I've made the balanced notch fullness, and it matches either of these two. This blouse would be a fitted princess line, and this one would be a blousey blouse, and you wouldn't have to sew in the waistline darts, but you would need to sew in the shoulder and the front armhole dart. So I'm going to save this one for jacket practice, and I'm going to use my blousey one and add a front facing extension onto it. So just looking at this blousey one, when you're making a blouse and it buttons up the front, you need to add an extension for the buttons, and traditionally that's 5/8. If you end up using really large buttons, you'll have to make an adjustment for that, or really small ones. But for now, we're just going to move this line out 5/8 of an inch. So create a line, offset, select the line to offset. I want it to extend. Let's try not selecting the reference location so you see what happens with that. So I'm choosing the line. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to click on, because the line is moving and I want to just say value, it's going to be a positive number coming away. So I'm going to type in 0.625 because that's 5/8 of an inch. Oh, and look at that. The line is solid. And so I'm going to cancel. I've got my line there like I want it, but I'm going to come up to Edit, Customize Preferences, and go to Paths, and I'm going to switch to, well, we will come back to that. So I'm looking for where, there it is. So under Display, I want my pieces filled, I want to fit them in the work area, and I'm going to switch to clipped and dashed because I had solid lines and I don't want solid lines. So I'm going to apply and save. And apparently it doesn't like where I'm saving my pieces, so I'm going to switch that really quick. Alright, well, I don't want my pieces that dark. It's supposed to look like oak tag, but I want to be able to see them, so I'm going to come into and turn my opacity down. And I could edit this out, but people have that kind of thing change on their screen often enough that I like to make sure you go through it occasionally. Then I've got these black again, so I need to switch that one to something entirely different. The point is, these all need to be different colors, and the prompt needs to be dark. And I really want my grids. Okay, well that's better, except now suddenly I'm in metric again. So user environment, choose imperial. I like 3 places, 0.375, save. Okay, now it looks like it's supposed to. It's got a dotted line, and I can tell that that's on the outside. So this is my center front fold, and I want it to stay my center front, but I need to switch my outer edge with this line. So I'm going to go into Modify Line Swap, choose the internal line that's dotted, right click, say OK, choose the solid line. Now my center front is right here and my fold line is right here. Do I need to type fold right there so that you remember? I think I'm going to do that. So create annotation. Right here I'm going to put center front. So that's my center front line. I will eventually need a notch at the top. And this one is where the facing is going to fold back. It's not going to be cut on the fold though. Alright, when you've added a 5/8 of an inch extension out here, you can continue on. So pause until that's finished. I want a back neck facing that is the same shape as the back neck and comes in this area. So for convenience, I'm going to measure this line and make my facing the same width as the space between the dart and the neck. So that's in Verify, Measure Line Length. I'm measuring that line. Right click, say OK, it's 2.485. So I'm going to add a line on here that's perpendicular that comes down at 2.485 so that when I have my facing here that I'm making, it will match the facing there that I'm making. And maybe it will be less confusing if I make this facing first, so let's do that. So create, copy, create line copy, select the line to copy. I'm still in value, and say OK. The piece that's getting the line is the same piece. Say OK again. And enter the new distance, it's 2.485, but it's negative because it's going inside the piece. Say OK. Oh, well, I didn't choose that it needs to go out the rest of the way, but I guess that's not an option on this one. So now I need to adjust that line so it's longer. So I'm going to go into Modify Line Adjust, and I'm just going to touch the line, touch the end I want to move, and I'm going to switch back to cursor. And when I try to extend that out, it looks to me like that line's curving, and I want it to be a right angle. So that did not work the way I wanted it to. So I'm going to zoom in on it and try it another way. Do you see how that's curved? It's not a right angle, so it's not going to work anyway. So I'm going to cancel. I'm also going to delete that line, and I may come back and do it that same way again, but I need to establish some boundaries. So I'm going to create a 2-point line perpendicular on the line. So that's create line, 2-point, down arrow, come down to the third box. It says perpendicular on line. And I'm going to just choose the edge of this because that's where I know I want it to be. And I brought that line out. I know it's perpendicular to the shoulder, which is how I want my facing to be. And then on this one, I don't have a line like that, so I'm going to right click in the water. And right now I have half selected over here. If you look at the box, you can choose whole, but I've got half selected right now. I want to choose distance from point. So select the point to measure the distance from, highlight the point, and then I'm going to type in, because it's going clockwise, I'm going to enter a positive number, 2.485, and say OK. Alright, so those are my helper lines. This is where my facing needs to end up out here. And I'd like it a similar shape to my neckline. So we're going to try that again. But this time, instead of offsetting the line, I'm going to copy this one. So create line, copy, choose this line, say OK. This is the piece that gets the line, say OK. Now I have it, and I want to zoom in and make sure that I can see it, and I want it to line up with both of those. And I don't know, maybe I would get a line I like better by making a 2-point curve. A 2-point curve might be safer also in that this isn't touching when I zoom in. So I'm going to use that as a guideline, but I'm going to do it freehand. So you can leave that if you want to, as long as you extend that line out. I'll show you how to do that. So that again is modify line adjust, and you can touch this line, then you have to touch it again, and you can pull it out so it does cross over the line, and we know that it's touching. I'm not certain about this one. Yes, it looks like it crossed over that line. But I'm going to go to create 2-point curve, and I'm going to start a little higher, and I'm going to blend in over to here, and it's really similar, but I know I touched both ends of the line with it. So the way you do that is up to you. There are multiple ways. So I'm going to cancel out of that, and I'm going to create my back neck facing. Create, piece, trace, shoulder, neck, center back, straight line, new curve, other straight line. I didn't touch it out here. I touched the section of it I wanted to keep. So I'm going to say OK, and I don't want to trace one of the internal lines. I'm just going to accept the grain line it gives me, and it's in a nice place. So there's my back neck facing. I think I might even still, in a perfect world, I would probably change that even still. But I'm going to put back neck facing. If you forget to name it, it won't save. And I also want it to say blouse. So when I hover, it has my name and the name of the piece down at the bottom of the screen. And I'll say cancel because I'm through with that. Now, if I wanted to make this into a blouse or a jacket that had a full lining, then I would want to use the same line and come in here and trace it off kind of the opposite way. You know, I'd trace the lower half instead of the facing, and then I'd have my lining. But we'll do that on a jacket. But because I'm not going to do that, and I'm just going to delete these lines, modify, delete line. Oh, and it thinks we're on that one. Oh, yellow is my color, is it? Alright, so I have to touch down clear over here in order to get the lines, because my piece has to be highlighted in green before it knows that I'm talking about the piece. Okay, so that's back to normal. I didn't change this at all. And I'll move that. Oh, okay. Well, we'll edit that while we're at it. Modify. Nope. Edit. Annotation. Select the annotation to modify. Right click. And this is now my blouse, back, neck facing, and it's still size 8 of form 13. And this is going to be a cut one on the fold. And I want my characters to be 0.125 because that will fit nicely on the piece. Oh, but I didn't tell it to move, so I'm going to choose it again, right click, say OK, move, and set it down where I want it to be, and then say OK. Alright, so it's labeled the way it needs to be, but I don't like that shape. Do I care? Can I move on and still get an A? At this point, yes, but on your final project, just make sure they look nice. I'm going to try it again. Create 2-point curve. That looks more like I want it to look. I joined that point, so I'm going to split this line right there. Modify, line, split, right under that triangle, and modify, line, swap. Choose the dotted line, trade it clockwise in an order for the other two solid lines, and then delete those other two. It's still 2.485. Delete line. So it's normal for lines not to turn out exactly the way you want them and to fiddle with it and fix them. But to finish this piece, I need to merge those three. So from corner to corner, it's all one line. Modify, line, combine, clockwise in an order, say OK. And while I'm here, I'm going to cancel. I'm going to right click and say piece to menu. And I need to remember to add that to my model. So I'm going to set that piece out of the way and come back to this one so that it's far enough away from the other pieces that they're not going to respond when I touch this one. And if you read the book, it'll tell you to just delete everything off of the screen, and that's a really good habit. Okay. So I'm back to this. I'm going to bring my back neck facing back down. And I want to rotate my back neck facing so it's aiming into my front neck facing. So modify, set rotate, select the match point on the target piece. That's going to be the neckline end of my shoulder and then my shoulder line. And the same on this piece, because we want to make sure that our facing lines up with that. So I'm going to say cancel. And then we'll need to trim off 1/8 of an inch of both facing pieces, but not yet. So I want to create another 2-point line perpendicular on the line. So I'm going to highlight this one and I'm going to zoom in and make sure I'm right over that same spot. And I'm going to go ahead and pull that down. So that's a helper line for my facing. I want my facing to be wide enough to do its job, but I don't want it to end up behind that dart if I were to decide to sew it at some point. So I'm going to offset this one over to here before it gets to the dart. Create line offset. Choose either of these lines, and I'm going to line it up right there. Looks good. So this is going to become my facing shape, and I want a 2-point curve connecting them. So I'm making sure that I touch both lines so that it's connected, and I want that to be a smooth curve. There we go. So now I'm going to mirror the lines over to the other side, because I want my facing to be on the fold and attached to my piece. Create line mirror. Now keep in mind that what we're doing right now is creating a line by mirroring. You can also create and work with a piece by mirroring, and you don't want to get the two confused. So we're only mirroring a line, we're not mirroring a piece. Select the lines to mirror. I want this shoulder line, and I don't want that shoulder line, I want this one, and this one, and the curve, and this part of the line. And I also want to mirror my center front, so we can put notches on the other side. I don't need any of the other lines. So I'm going to say OK, and then choose the line to mirror about, and that's our fold line. Make sure you choose the fold line. So now when this folds back on itself, it's an exact mirror image around the fold line, and this is also a center front. So I've got two options. I can save this as a map and use it later if I want to, or I can trace off. I can swap. So I could actually swap this fold line for all of these dotted ones. And I'm going to save this. We might come back and use it. So I'm going to trace it off. So create piece trace. I'm clockwise and in order. So I'm ignoring the lines that are on this piece. I want the ones that were mirrored. And I'm going to say OK. And the internal lines that I want to keep my bust point and any information that I might use later. And I want my center fold lines. So I'm going to say OK to that. And there is my finished piece. And What am I going to call it this time? Blouse front with facing. Say OK. And cancel, or OK to get out of it. So this one, I'm kind of thinking I might save over that and use it as my blouse map if I choose to do something similar to that for my final project. So I'm going to come up and say File, Save As, and I want to choose this piece, and it's got front fullness, but it's a map. So when I put a map on the end, I know it's not an actual piece. I'm not going to leave it in my model, but I want to save it. Okay. So I'm going to cancel and send that one to the menu. And this one I already know is going to match right here, but I'll line it up there anyway. Modify, set rotate, match point on the target piece, the inside of the neck corner and the line, inside of the neck corner and the line, and cancel. So those match up really nicely right now. I'm a little surprised about that, but that has to do with the shoulder. Okay, so when you're making a blouse or a jacket, you want your facing to be snug on the inside and not ripple. And the easiest way to do that is, like in our pattern books, we would rotate that line in 1/8 of an inch. So I can rotate it, I can draw a line. There's several ways to do it. Rotating it, it's more difficult to tell whether you did it accurately. So what I'm going to do on both of them, and know that you can do this without a safety net, but I'm putting on a safety net. I'm going to create line copy, this one, and I want it to go on this one, and I just want it to be right where it is, so I'm going to say cancel. And the same thing with this. Okay, so now I have an extra line there on both pieces, and I'm going to come up to modify line rotate, and either line will do. I want to rotate that line, right click and say OK. The point on that line to rotate around is that one, and now you can see it's rotating. And I'm looking up at the menu box, and it's giving me numbers that are not helpful. I want to move it about that far, but I'm just going to come over to the box and switch to cursor, and I'm going to put in -0.125, which is 1/8 of an inch, and there you can see it moved and it looks accurate. And you could even draw a line here and double check and make sure that it's 1/8 of an inch, but that's what we typed in. So I'm going to rotate that line, say OK, choose the point to rotate around. We're looking, that's telling us which way it's going, so -0.125. OK. So I feel comfortable with that. We can delete them both, but if you ever need to double check and make sure that you've done it, you'd come into create 2-point line and just draw a line, switch to cursor, from one point to the other, and then verify line length, choose the line length, and then you can see exactly how far you rotated. But I'm going to go ahead and modify delete the extra lines, but I know that on both of my pieces I have a little extra cut off on the facing side so that it doesn't ripple underneath the body side. And I'm going to clean it up a little bit. So I want to rotate this piece back to where it was. So realign piece. And okay. And then I want to notch where the fold line is, so it's easy to fold exactly on the fold line. Create notch, and because it's the end point of a line, it's easy to put it in the right place. And then this one is going to be a little bit more difficult. I want my collar to end on this line before it overlaps so that it just touches the middle. So I need to put 2 notches right there. So let's see if, yeah, I think that's okay. The other way to do that would be to add a notch 5/8 of an inch in each direction of that line. So I can now delete these 2 lines. I think I'll leave them there for you. Each of these are the center front when it's folded around the 2 notches. Well, I'm going to delete them. Modify delete line, those 2. And if you're not going to plan to sew in this dart on a blousey one, and the map has already been saved, then you can go ahead and delete those lines also. And then we just need to merge these. But do I want to merge the neck and the hem? Yes, because there's a notch. So modify line, combine. I'm combining those 2. Say OK. Then the whole front. Say OK. The neckline. OK. And some of us on the last assignment forgot about the dart, and I want a dart flap in it, and it needs to go down. So you'll come up to Advanced, Dart, Fold. When you're choosing a dart that you want to fold, which means to fill it in, you also want to have your fold lines and your notches there so that you know where to fold it. Then it says to select the dart on the side to fold to, and I want the flap to go down, so I'm going to choose the down side of the dart. And that's what it gives me. Now it's ready to have seam allowance added. But I think we'll come back and add all of the seam allowance at once and clean up our model. So I'm going to save them both. I'll just choose save, touch both of them, say OK. And I also changed that one. So these are the 3 pieces that are new. So I'm going to come up to File, Create Edit Model, Add Pieces. There's my blouse. I want to add a map for now, and the front and the back neck facing, and say OK. And there they are.